It's very cool to be recognized by your peers and to know that your work has not gone unrecognized. When peers nominate you, it means that it comes from people that do the same things that you do and run into the same difficulties, challenges, and it is very important. I come from a family where our parents, as well as my uncles and aunts, most of them didn't even finish high school. So my cousins and my siblings became the first generation that we actually went to college. And there was this anecdote in the family that my maternal grandmother, whom I never met because she died of postpartum depression, was a healer. She lived in a rural town in Chihuahua, Mexico, and that somehow one of us had inherited the skills or the genes to heal, and we grew up with a lot of incentives about going into the health field. And so I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. I have 2 sisters, and we all went into the health field. I'm a psychiatrist. The sister younger than me is a child dentist, and the youngest one is a geriatrician. So one way or another, we all ended up in the health field. And that was the first inspiration, probably. And I remember that I toyed with the idea before going to college about going into graphic design. In my time, we didn't have computer animated designs or things like that. But whatever was the ancestor of that, I got a little bit attracted to it. So I remember going to do that testing to see what are your aptitudes for what kind of career, and it showed that I was good for careers like architecture and medicine. So I went to medical school, and then halfway through it, I remember, I'm talking about the 1980s, I saw in the newspaper that new research was finding that emotions could be explained biochemically. And it was funny because that research had already existed for many years, but it was actually on the newspaper. And the next year, I took my first class on psychopathology, and I just fell in love with psychiatry. And ever since, I finished my residency in 1993, and here I am 30 years later doing psychiatry day in and day out. Well, I wish I could say that everybody has a good time here and gets help with what they're expecting, but it would be unreal to say that everybody does. But I can say that a great majority of the people that come and look for services with us stay with us. We have carefully designed a physical space where we try to transmit peace and tranquility. Our staff, which is all local staff that we train and teach here, are very sensitive and very capable of dealing with people in distress, people with mental and emotional needs. And that's the first thing we try to communicate, that we can help them here. And we try to minimize the burden on the patients with things like insurance coverage, getting appointments on time, issues with their visits with their medications, finding visits with other providers like therapists, or to go get tested for autism or for dementia, which are services that we try to connect them with. And we've been very pleased when we get told by patients that when they come here, they find solutions to their needs. Well, I'm very happy to say that definitely there's more minority representation in those lines. However, it's not enough. I think we're going in the right direction. And I have to say that in areas like this, underserved, rural, with very few educational options, we need to do more work yet, because I'm very pleased to say that I have a lot of patients, young adolescents that, for example, they come and see me for things like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and they respond very well to treatment. They have very supportive parents. They run into the right teacher, and then they do very well. They graduate with very good grades, and as they're approaching graduation, we have conversations like, oh yeah, well, you know what, I want to be a psychiatrist like you, they tell me sometimes. And then when we start talking about all the years ahead, right? I mean, you have to go through medical school, well, pre-med first, then medical school, then it's like doing all school again, another 12 or 14 years. And then they get scared and say, well, maybe no, I'm not ready for that, to go to school so long. And I think that because in general, there are very few of us in areas like this, the family level, there isn't a lot of talk about the value of investing a lot of time in your education so that you can become a psychiatrist in this case. But it could be a physician of any specialty, a family doctor, a surgeon, a cardiologist. And I have to say that in all the years that I've been here, it's a very, very small list of people that were born and raised here that eventually became doctors and returned to work in this area. So I think that in areas like this, we need to not only come and talk about all the careers, but also create the way, the pathway so that it is feasible, especially those that been getting very good grades, becoming very good students, that's how long some careers take, right? So unfortunately, and there are a lot of factors here, including poverty and low income and stuff. Many of them are thinking about a 2-year career or 4-year career so they can start working and helping into the family economy. So I think there's still a lot of work to do. Well, I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm very proud of that. I have to say, well, I'm of Mexican background, and I went to medical school in Mexico, and then just the idea of pursuing a residency in the United States was a challenge. I went to medical school in Monterrey and Mexico, and that's a city very close to the border. It's like a 3-hour drive to San Antonio, Texas. And the reason I say that is because in my class, and there was 300 of us in my class, there were about 10 of us that were interested in coming to the US to the residency. Of those 10, only 2 of us were of Mexican origin. Others were American that had gone to Mexico to study, to become medical doctors. And this other person became an internist. He is actually in Texas now. And we used to get together to study. And I was fortunate enough to have been accepted to a residency program in El Paso, Texas. And being Latino there was actually plus was an asset, right? So I went to Texas Tech University. The main campus is in Lubbock, Texas, and a satellite campus is the one in El Paso. They have another one in Amarillo, Texas. And then one of the assets was that I spoke Spanish, for example. So it actually helped me get in. And each year had 3 residents. My 2 classmates were 2 women whom I love and I haven't seen in a long time. One was of Texan background. She was from El Paso, and the other one was of Puerto Rican background. So it was very cool. However, in the other years, it was sort of a mix, right? We had international graduates of Arab background, Indian background, and some white Americans who were there too. So in that scenario, it was actually an advantage. So I spent 3 years there, and then I did 2 extra years in San Diego, and things changed there. Okay, we were about 12 residents per class, and in the whole, it was a 3-year program, and in all the 3 years, it was at 12 to 14, we're talking 36, 30, 40 people. There was only 2 Latinos. So with that, that's when I first had that feeling of a minority, right? And yes, it was still an advantage to speak Spanish, but not as noticeable as it was in El Paso, because it was a larger school with more resources. So most departments had someone translating, so speaking Spanish was not that much of an asset. And I remember that there were no Asians in the program, no African Americans in the program at that time. And it was just us. Another Puerto Rican physician, a lady, whom I haven't seen in a while either. But, and then myself. So I remember that something peculiar happened because that school, UCSD, which I'm still connected with, and I'm very proud of having graduated from there, had an internal competition for research. And it's a very research-oriented program. And out of the 12 that were graduating, only 4 people presented a research project. And they were surprised that I presented one, because I had already entered in an advanced grade or year. I didn't go through the whole program with them because I was transferring from Texas. And something interesting happened. For the entire 3 years, there was this colleague whom I still work with and stay in touch with. Actually, I talked to him about a year ago. He was like the researcher of the group, right? Everybody knew that he wanted to do research, and he had been presenting projects through the 3 years. And then I come in, and within that year, I put together a research project, and I actually was able to enter the competition, and I almost beat him, right? And it was so funny because I understand that it didn't make sense that they would give me the award when I was coming at the last year, and I didn't have such a research background like he did. I actually had won a national competition of residents, but so had him. And then he had a fancier project than mine. Anyway, so it created a debate, right? And then the Latino thing came up, right? How, so a lot of debate came up with, because he was not a minority physician and I was, and how come he was winning? Was that what was making him win and stuff? So beyond that, it has been actually very easy. So I guess your choices also have something to do with it, right? Because I chose to come to predominantly Latino community where my work is greatly appreciated, where a lot of physicians don't want to come to work with. I've made this my home, and it has been very pleasant and a great privilege. Well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're Latino or not. Either you're a good physician or not, right? So, I mean, you have to be skilled, you have to be updating yourself, and you have to have very good manners, and be especially good on the doctor-patient relationship. It doesn't matter what your ethnic background might be. But in an area like here, it's really been an advantage because Latino patients quickly identify with you and tell you things that, in my case, for example, they tell me things that they don't tell their other physicians, right? Just yesterday, I had a lady, and it's not, the whole conversation went on in English, but she is a Latino background. And she was showing me her MRI report because she has lower back pain. And it was so funny because she came with the paper and, you know, after greeting each other and stuff, she pulls it out and says, I want you to tell me what this means. And I said, oh, what happened? I said, you don't, did your doctor, it was a neurologist that ordered it, right? And she goes, oh no, I'm gonna see him tomorrow, but I want you to tell me first because you explain things to me better. And I said, what's that? Why is that? It so happens that the neurologist is not Latino. I don't know if that has something to do with it or not, but the point is that they even want to talk to me about things that are not specifically in the psychiatric field. And I think that that has some to do with it. On the other hand, I have to say that for the non-Latino patients, which in this community are the minority, something funny happened. I once had a patient who's very conservative, hardline, white American who, has a thing with people who are not of his same background. And then he was saying things about other ethnic groups, right? And I said, you know what, Mr. So-and-so, let me remind you that, I'm not white either. I said, what you're speaking, oh, no. But here being Mexican is like us. It's the same thing, So it was very weird, right? Because he, and so the examples he was giving me is because we have a lot of physicians here who are of Indian background, for example, or of Arab background or Pakistani background. And then he in particular felt like, oh no, I cannot trust those guys. I said, Mr., I'm not going to say the name, come on, we have either good physicians or not. And I think I was able to leave an impression on him to get over the appearance, especially when your health, when it is about your health. So I think that in rural areas like this one, I think the ethnicity still plays a strong role, and that we want to use it to our advantage, but we also don't want it to become a barrier with our patients. A lot of the medications that are approved right now, not only in the psychiatric field, but in any other fields, cardiology, metabolic diseases, we don't have enough representation of Latinos as we do in the general population. As an example, we know that in the last census, the Latinos in the U.S. represent between 16 and 18% of the nation's population. Well, in clinical research trials for Alzheimer's disease, only 1 to 2% of the participants are of Latino background. So there's a great disproportion there that there's a big gap that we need to close. So that would be my final message, that not only for Latinos to believe in psychiatry, to take care of their health, and that includes mental health, but also to think of participating in clinical trials.